So hello and a very warm welcome back to my channel. This is Laith at Managing Marathons, and today I thought I'd share with you the top 8 tips for running a marathon. Now, for some of you, these will seem quite basic. If you've run several marathons and you're up to multiple marathons now, some of this may seem fairly basic. Having said that, I've now run 15 marathons. I've just come back from the Alpes-Maritimes marathon from Nice to Cannes, where I did bonk, and I'll come back to that in a moment. So even for somebody who's done 15 marathons, I sometimes forget the fundamentals, the baseline, the basics. So I thought I'd recap here because I myself just made a few very basic fundamental mistakes just a week last Sunday. So I'm going to go through these top 8 tips with perhaps another bonus tip at the end. So let's follow through all the way to the end if we can. So there are 8 on here, and I'm just playing a little game to see if you can play along if you like, to see if there are any that you can guess. So the number 1 spot, and these are not necessarily in ranking order. These are the ones that came top of mind when I was thinking about it. What do we need to do when we're planning for a marathon that's coming up in a few months' time? So the very first one, no shock there. I'm just going to keep it very basic with one word prompts here. A plan. What do I mean by a plan? Very simply this: follow a plan. So it could be as short as 12 weeks. I've seen them at 16 and even 20 weeks, which of course is 5 months. So if you're planning to run a marathon, in 3 to 5 months' time, pick a plan that works for you. If you're in a position to get a coach, and they will individualize and personalize and make that plan bespoke for you. Now, a plan can be got online. You can get free downloads or more bespoke ones. The free ones tend to be very generic, very general, although they're not bad, and you can certainly follow them. And make sure that when you follow the plan, that there's some kind of consistency. So you are consistently running and increasing your mileage very slowly over time, so you avoid any injuries. So build the mileage slowly, follow a plan, have a think about how far out you are. Of course, for many people, the plan will differ. It depends on how regularly you've been training, how long you've been running, your fitness level, all of that kind of stuff. So have a look at a plan that suits you. And if you want to go more bespoke, there are many apps online that you can pay for that will be more bespoke to you according to your age, your height, your weight, etc., etc. So lots of plans out there, but follow a plan. So you've got something documented that you can sort of track your progress, which is really important when it comes to a marathon training plan. So that's number 1. Number 2, fuel. So fuel properly, and by fuel I mean what you eat. That is of course on race day, but more of that later. But leading up to the marathon, once you're following the plan, particularly on your long runs, typically a Saturday or Sunday for most people, make sure you're practicing your fuel strategy. Stick with one set of nutrition brand that you use currently. I happen to use Moriton, which I like and works for me. Yours may be different, but I stick with Moriton. So for example, in Berlin and Chicago, where they did have Moriton, I didn't need to change my plan. For other marathons, they use something entirely different. So I have to stick with my own nutrition. So make sure you've got nutrition dialed in. It's a plan that you're following. Don't change or vary too much off that plan. And as you're building up to your strategy, particularly in the last couple of weeks, 3 weeks, start to load up with your carbs. And by carb loading, I'm sure you've heard this all before, but I don't just mean a big bowl of pasta the night before the marathon. Because in my opinion, not only is that fairly foolish, you're also putting yourself in a very awkward position for the next morning, particularly if you eat very late the night before. Carbing up tends to be 4 or 5 days starting, 4 or 5 days out from the marathon. And it doesn't mean you ignore the other food groups, so a little bit of protein, a little bit of fat, but also predominantly carbs leading up to the marathon, 3 or 4 days out, as I say. And that also means you can have drink mixes which are carb heavy. So lots of carbohydrates to top up your glycogen levels in your liver and of course in your muscles. So practice this stuff, and particularly on your long runs, fuel up so there's no nasty surprises on the big day of the marathon. So moving on to number 3, stay hydrated. Now, hydrated, yes, this is a nutrition plan. So the fuel is one thing, but that's kind of your food, whereas hydrating is the water. And not only the water, but water with electrolytes. There's lots of studies out there to suggest that when you drink water with electrolytes, you're more likely to retain that water, and it's more beneficial because obviously you've got salts and minerals which are aiding your hydration strategy, your plan. So while you're running, during your long runs, make sure you're practicing whatever hydration strategy with the electrolytes you've chosen to use on the long runs. Again, so on the marathon, on the day that you are running the big marathon, you'll have no surprises, and you're used to and using the same electrolytes that you have been using in your 12 or 16 or 20 week training plan. All right. And when it comes to the marathon, of course, it's before, during, and after. So stay hydrated. Particularly, I've done a couple, 3, 4 now in Spain and the south of France. They're very warm countries compared to the UK. And relatively speaking, there's a differential there's a delta of about 10 to 15 degrees sometimes. I'm running here, it's 6 to 8 degrees. I go to Spain, it's about 25 degrees. So the hydration strategy all of a sudden becomes even more important, because when you finish and there's that film of white stuff on your face and your arms, that's salt. And electrolytes and minerals coming out, but salt predominantly. So replace those so you don't end up hitting the wall prematurely, as it were. So stay hydrated is number 3. Number 4 is your kit and gear. Now, again, nothing here changes from the others. Make sure that whatever kit you're using on race day and all gear, whichever term you choose to use, is the same kit that you're using through all your training block, whatever that might be. So I happen to have my favorite black shorts, which have got multiple pockets. I always use the same one. I've got a spare one as a backup, but it's exactly the same design, if you like, with the same pockets in the same places. But I use one specifically for marathons, and I train in it quite a lot. So there's no chafing, there's no nasty surprises. That's my shorts. But I also use regularly different training tops, so each one of them gets used to you, so the seams don't chafe or any chafing at all when you're coming to race day. So gear is really important. Of course, one of the most important ones are your shoes. So make sure you're not running in brand new shoes on race day. Train in the same shoes you intend to run the marathon in. Shoes are obviously desperately important. If you start to get blisters or aches and pains in your feet, you're going to struggle on marathon day. So make sure you're training in the same shoes that you are going to run the marathon in. And when I say gear and kit, that includes everything. So yes, your top, whatever that is. Yes, your underwear. Make sure you've got comfortable underwear. I tend to run in Runderwear, which is a brand. There's absolutely no chafing. It works extremely well for me. And it also boils down to basic things like your socks and, of course, t-shirt and shorts, all of which are desperately important to make sure that you don't get any chafing or discomfort when you're running the marathon. So use those on your training block, same kit and gear, same fuel, and same hydration strategy. So there's a pattern emerging here, isn't there? So on to number 5, pace. I'm sure you've heard this expression before. Your race, your pace. And that is, although very basic, it's so true. So many times I've sped off at the beginning of a marathon thinking, I'm feeling great. I've just been on a great taper, so I'm feeling energetic. I've carved up and I'm feeling full of beans, full of energy. The problem is when you go out too fast, because the excitement is there, the enthusiasm is there, you're being picked up by all the music and the MC and the DJ, just enlivening the whole start line, that you tend to carry that pace for the first 5 or 10K. And I made that mistake just last week, even though I've run this many marathons. So your race, your pace. And what I would say on that is, for me, if I'm trying to get a sub 4, I know I need to be around about 5:25, 5:30 pace per kilometer just to be safe. But I'm deliberately now running at 5:45, even 5:50 pace for the first 5 or 10 kilometers, partly because I'm trying to negative split. I haven't done that yet. It's harder than it sounds, but also because I'm learning the hard way that actually going out slower than you intend to, and then even slower again, 10, 15, 20 seconds per kilometer slower, at least for the first 3 to 5 kilometers, will save you that valuable energy that you need after kilometer 35, 37, where you start to feel the fatigue from running all that distance. So your race, your pace, start slow and make sure that you can leave a little bit of energy, keep some in reserve for the second half of the marathon. That's 21K or 13 miles. Make sure you can then start to pick up as you start to get through the second half of the marathon. It's hard. It is hard. The excitement is very high at the beginning of the marathon. You've been waiting weeks, possibly months to do this marathon. You're full of beans, you're full of energy, your training block has gone well, you've tapered well, you're full of glycogen and carbohydrates, so you tend to want to go off quickly. Hold yourself back. Your race, your pace. Don't be pulled along by all these people in front of you. And on that point, when the marathon organizers or the race director ask you, what's your anticipated finish time? All I would say with that is be honest with yourself. Because if you're going into a faster group, you're going to be left behind. And then psychologically, it doesn't feel good because all of these people are just zooming past you. And then you may pick up your pace and you will be able to keep up with them, but you're on a very short leash because all of a sudden, you know you could only manage a 4 or 4:15 hour marathon. You've gone out at a 3:30 marathon pace, and all of a sudden you'll bonk at the classic mile 20 or kilometer 32. So be aware, your race, your pace, start slow, and then think about, I could probably go even slower here. So moving on to number 6, mindset. Now, mindset is desperately important. You've got world-class athletes from the track to basketball to Formula One, and they all have mindset coaches. Never mind coaches for other elements of what they're good at, but mindset coaches. So how to relax, how to visualize, how to picture, how to imagine their race is going. And I do this, and I have been doing this a lot more in the recent times. So as I say, visualize, imagine, picture you crossing the line in the time that you want to cross the line in. It's really important to make sure that mentally you've already outlined the route. You've already pictured the route. You know where all the aid stations are. You know where there are some danger spots where the road maybe narrows. By looking at the race plan, by looking at the route, by studying the course, we all know that there's a green line or a blue line, depending on which country you're in, that you can follow, which is the shortest route. That's great. It's not always possible. That's one thing I will say for sure. But also be aware where all the aid stations are. The aid stations are there to help you for a number of reasons. One, if you've got your hydration pack, not so easy in the US marathons, if you've got a hydration vest on and you're carrying your own nutrition and your own hydration, great. You will save quite a lot of time, possibly 30 seconds, maybe even a minute if you run through the middle of the aid stations which are on both sides, because it gets very congested, particularly on the large major marathons. It also includes some of the non-major marathons. For example, Paris, which had 55,000 runners this year. Rome, Valencia, these are 35,000+ runners. They're not world marathon majors, but they get very, very busy. And if you want to save yourself some time because you've got your own hydration pack, knowing where they are means that you can get yourself ready and run through the middle rather than both sides, which can get very slippery and very congested. And I have seen some pretty nasty falls in and out of aid stations. So be aware with your mindset. Think about the race. Think about your start. Visualize it. Consider where you're going to be. Smile to yourself. Give yourself some affirmations for the beginning, during, at the end of the marathon. Stuff that will keep you positive. Smile to yourself. You'll see often online and on reports and on all sorts of various platforms that Kipchoge smiles all the time. You rarely see him not smiling. That's sending a message to himself as a physiological indication that I'm doing well, I'm happy. And that mindset really does control. Your body controls what your mind controls what your body does. And if you're positive and you think yourself over the line, of course things can go wrong, but you're much more likely to have a better day by being positive about the marathon and having a positive mindset, imagining and picturing yourself coming over the line, getting that medal, getting that t-shirt, having that first drink of whatever they're giving you at the end. And then you'll just ease into the marathon much more comfortably. So mindset, a very big one. Try and consider how you are going to finish and think about how I will finish this marathon and I will finish it strong. Number 7, and as I said, not in any particular order, but tapering. Sometimes tapering can be quite confusing. If you're on a training block that's 16 to 20 weeks, you might want to taper from 3 weeks out. If you want a more aggressive taper, which I've done as well, just do it from 1 week out. It depends on your fitness levels and how long you've given your training block and frankly, how many miles you're doing or accruing each week. If you're doing 100 kilometers a week and you want to taper off, how you do that's entirely up to you. But there's often suggestions at about 20 to 30% taper per week. So from 100 miles, from the end of your training block, you might want to come down to 70, 50 give or take, and 20 the week before the marathon, including your 5K shakeout on the Saturday before the marathon. So tapering is really important. On that point, you will feel a bit strange when you taper because you've been running a lot more, you've been training much harder than during your taper week, and you will get the jitters, you will get these phantom aches and pains. Don't worry, that happens a lot. It's part of what we call maranoia. So the paranoia of leading up to a marathon, and tapering means you're physiologically now in a very different place to where you were just a week ago. You're eating differently, starting to carb up maybe. You are definitely running less during the week. And you now have all that extra energy and you don't know what to do. And your mind plays tricks with you. You may think or imagine that you've got aches and pains. Just keep on tapering, follow the plan, drop the mileage down, eat well, and you'll find that this really does resurrect all your energy levels on the day of the marathon. So tapering is important. Moving on to number 8, here we go, recovery. Now, I happen to be doing 12 marathons this year in aid of Young Lives versus Cancer. So recovery is a big one for me personally. Now, if you're doing 1 marathon a year or just a one and done and you're not going to do one again, then recovery, yes, is important, but not as important as if you plan to do another marathon very soon after, or maybe an ultra marathon. Depends on what your plan is. So recovery is really important. What I would say with the recovery is when you finish the marathon, try not to stop and just sit down. Because I promise you, it's going to be very hard to get back up. What I tend to do is stay on my feet. So I've got some kind of active recovery going on. And then I pace up and down and walk up and down. Yes, I get my medal and my t-shirt. And then I go to whatever nutrition they're given at the end of the marathon. And I tend to walk at least 10 or 15 minutes to keep that circulation going and to make sure we're trying to recover as quickly as possible with as much water or rehydration drink, whatever your choice of drink is, as possible. And then very quickly after that, try and eat. Your body now is depleted, it's lacking everything. So as soon as you can, and I know sometimes you don't feel like it, sometimes that happens to me as well, try and eat well. So your body's depleted, so it needs to backfill everything is just spent. You've just been on your feet 3, 4, 5, 6 hours running. You're taxing your body highly. You've asked your body to do something very difficult. So now it's time to pay your body back and give it something worth digesting and swallowing and eating and rehydrating all your cells and making sure you got that nutrition in there. Now, it doesn't matter what it is initially, calories will do. If you want a cheeseburger and chips, go for it. If you want a bowl of pasta, go for it. If you want a pizza, go for it. It's probably the nicest pizza or bowl of chips you're ever going to have. So recovery is important. Make sure you're walking around to get rid of those toxins and all that lactic acid. Make sure you definitely drink. If you don't eat, at least drink more than you anticipate. And if you need to go to the loo, go to the loo, but keep drinking just to get your body rehydrated. So that's my top 8 tips for a marathon. As I say, even if you've run marathons before, some of these are useful to me, even though I've run several marathons now. And case in point, last weekend, as I've already said, the Alpes-Maritimes Nice to Cannes marathon, I was in the 3:45 pen and I'd trained well and I'd carved up well. I got a good night's sleep, which is rare. And I got to about kilometer 25, and which is more than halfway, and I was still on for a 3:45. So I was really pleased with myself. And I thought, God, I'm actually ahead of time here. I might even finish in a 3:40. But I made the fundamental mistake, which I talked about earlier, which is pace. I just went out too soon. It was a beautiful day. You're right there on the Promenade d'Anglais. It's sunny, stunning scenery, palm trees. The MC and the DJ were playing music. It was a party atmosphere, and I just went out too fast. And I even thought at the time, this is probably too fast, looking at my pace. And I thought, okay, I'm well trained. I've eaten well. I've slept well. I should be okay. I wasn't. And I ended up coming in, I think it was 4:20 in the end. So about 30 minutes slower than I anticipated. So I've revisited this and your pace, your race, your pace really is an important one. Start slow. That's not the end. I'm going to give you one more bonus tip, and that is nothing new. You've heard this, I'm sure, and nothing new means everything. You've already heard me talk about the 8 points there on the previous page, but race day, definitely nothing new. Don't change your hydration. Don't change your nutrition. Don't change what you're wearing, and definitely don't change your underwear or your shoes. Keep it what you've been training with. Travel with it. Make sure it's what you've been training in and with all along through your training block. Fueling. Don't change from Moriton to high five all of a sudden, or from tailwind to something else. Use what you have been using. The last thing you want on race day is gut problems or GI issues. That is not a good place to be. So keep with what you've been using. It will pay dividends. And of course, all sorts of things like shoes, your kit, the expo. I've seen so many people try new things at the expo and even buying things. And I've overheard conversations saying, I'll be all right. These are great trainers. I've had them before. And it might be the Saucony Pro 4, for example. And although they've trained in them, they haven't used the ones that they're about to buy, but they want them shiny and new for race day. So they're going to buy a new pair. Now, even if it's the same brand and the same model and the same size, I would honestly suggest not using them, because the shape of your foot hasn't got used to that shoe yet, even though it's the same brand and the same model. So stick with the ones you've been training in. Expos can be a very dangerous place. People try new gels, they try new water or new drinks, they try new shoes, they try new shorts. No, buy them if you want to. I'm always up for merchandise at the expos, but keep them for later. Use what you've brought with you and make sure on the day that you're comfortable and you're in the same kit and have the same nutrition on board and hydration on board as you've been training with all along through your training block. So that's it. Basically, nothing new is the bonus tip. So I hope that's helped. Please leave some comments if you've got. I'd love to hear any stories. You've had any horror stories. I've certainly had a few. The last one in Nice was a bit of a wake-up call for me, and I've heard others as well. So if you've got any stories you want to share, please do. My next video, when it comes out, will be about the Valencia Marathon.